Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Before we get into the review today, I just have a little thing to ask of you. So I have decided to try and do a different thumbnail style, just like I did last time. And last time I asked for your opinion on it in the form of a straw poll. There is a straw poll in the description of this video. There is also a straw poll in the pinned comments that I put up. And if you could pick which one you like. Basically we have the old style, which is very similar to what you've seen over the last month or so, and then we have the new style. So I'll let them play here, and then what we'll do is we'll get straight into the review. Thank you very much for your points. Today in War Thunder we're having a look at the P-40F-10. This is the new Rank 2 battle rating 2.7 American aircraft, and as you can see it is sat here in a folder in the tree after the P-40E-1, and it does perform incredibly like it, but with some definite distinctions. The first thing to understand is the armor profile on this machine. You have 38mm of bulletproof glass, 3mm, and also 8mm behind you. This is not really going to be enough to do anything. The bulletproof glass will be nice, but overall you won't really get pilot sniped in this thing. What will happen is your wings will fall off or your fuselage will get hit, so you don't really have to worry about the bulletproof glass. The X-ray is kind of an interesting story. It pretty much tells the story of this aircraft. We have 6 50 caliber machine guns, which are always good. Even though they are not the ones with the APIT rounds, they're still good enough to be able to rip planes apart, and I've been getting incredibly lucky with them, getting a lot of pilot snipes. On top of this, you have the Packard V1650, but the thing is, the P-40F-10 had a Merlin in it, so I think this might be just a naming issue, something that hopefully is changed in the future. It does have a liquid cooling system, the oil cooling system, and another one here, and also the self-sealing fuel tank. Generally, the minimum load on this machine is 30 minutes of fuel, and you'll never need more than that in a realistic or any other real game mode. Maybe if you're playing Enduring Confrontation you want to take a little bit more, but even then I highly doubt it. You also have another oil cooling system here. So if you do head on someone and they do get a shot in, what's going to happen is they're either going to hit your engine, they're going to hit your liquid cooling and your oil cooling, and your fuel, and maybe your pilot. So they're all in a great line here, so generally it's not the best to go on head-on with people, especially when people are running around with these buffed cannons and one-shotting stuff. So the best thing to do is to actually set up kills instead of just trying to head-on stuff, because you do have the maneuverability to do it. Modifications wise, with aircraft like this, for me personally, the flight performance is always the most important bit about them. On top of it, with the default belts, you do want to change them quite quickly, so what I do is I go radiator, offensive 12mm, compressor, airframe, engine wings repair, engine injection, cover, and then you get the rest as you go along. I don't really mind the spread of 650s, especially on a machine like this. It's got a high fire rate, so you're going to be able to pinpoint where you're going to attack quite easily, but the flight performance stuff means that if you come up against stuff like BF-109s, which are higher battle rating than you, or Focke-Wulfs, you have a chance against them instead of just getting annihilated by them. It also helps a little bit with your engine, which can be a bit temperamental sometimes when it overheats. On top of everything, you do get some secondary weapons, so you get 2 100-pounders, 1 500, or 2 100-pounders, and 1 500, pretty much in this configuration here, as you can see. So the 2 100s drop first, and then the 500 drops second. When it comes to the secondary weapons, you should only use them in ground realistic. So this is an out-and-out fighter when it comes to it. So weighing it down with bombs is just kind of a disservice to what you can actually do in this plane. So I thought, well, what lineup can we set up at 2.7? First of all, we'll have a look at the other planes at 2.7. So you have the B-34, you have the F4F3 and F4F4, and then you have the other P-40E. So I think there is definitely a shout to take the P-40F, especially since it's pretty much very similar to the P-40E, apart from slightly better at low to medium altitude. So if you are setting up just a 2.7 ground realistic lineup, I think you take that and then something like a B-34 or even an F2A3, which will be better when you are just turning with people. On top of everything like this, we have to have a ground ground set of vehicles around it. So we do have a few. You got the M3 Lee, the M4A3105, and then you can stick it with something like an M16 MGMC, or you can stick it with a Grant 1 if you have it, or an M8A1, or any of these vehicles. So you can actually, you are able to create a lineup around 2.7, which isn't too bad in ground forces, but it's not the best. The best one, if we're looking at these statistics, is around about that 3337 mark, but still, you're not going to run this thing at 2.7, especially when you have stuff like the P38G1, you have the P39Qs, and of course the Hellcats, which are always going to run over all of them at 3.7. So this, if you're running a 2.7 lineup just in ground realistic, I think it's worth it. If not, then it's pretty much just, you should keep away from it, and there is just better options at some places. And then of course you've got to show you the damage of the aircraft, which I think is kind of a nice little feature, even if it isn't that useful for most players. But yeah, overall I've enjoyed my time in this aircraft. I haven't died yet. Let's look at the stats of this. It's very similar to the what I would class as the P-40E, so of course I'm going to have a pretty good time in this. Let's just find these stats on it. P-40F-10, 12 kills, 6 flyouts, 0 deaths, 50% win rate. The games that I've lost so far have just been BV-238s running away and not being able to catch them and then bombing us out. So it wasn't we lost the battle from not having enough people, it's literally the Germans running away. So yeah, overall, good stats already in this thing. Haven't died yet. It's a good aircraft, it really is. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to do a history section, and then we're going to do a gameplay section. Now, just to let you know, if you're new here, there is links in the description which will take you to either the gameplay section or the history section if you want to skip parts of it, if you don't want to see it. So anyway, let's get on to the history. In 1941, a P-40D was fitted with a 1300 horsepower British-built Rolls-Royce Merlin 28 engine. It had a single-stage, 2-speed supercharger, and it flew for the first time on June the 30th, 1941. This was an experimental version of the P-40T, and it was distinguished from the stock P-40E by the absence of the top-mounted carburetor air scoop. The Merlin engine did much to overcome the limitations imposed by the Allison, and a total of 1,311 examples powered by the American-made version of the Merlin built by the Packard Motor Car Company were ordered under the designation P-40F. So the P-40F and later versions were also known as the Warhawk in the US service, which is why the one in game is called Warhawk as well. If you look at the P-40E, that's why it's not called it, and why the F is, if you're confused. So the first 699 planes of the P-40F series, they had no dash numbers, since the production block designation system was not yet in full effect, and the dash numbers were first used on the P-40F-5CU model, which introduced a fuselage elongated from 31 feet 2 inches to 33 feet 4 inches. So because it says P-40F-10C in-game, it actually does make a difference. A lot of people were talking to me about what's the difference between a P-40F and a P-4010. Well, that's what we're going to get into here. So the reason why they elongated it was to improve directional stability. The longer fuselage was then retained in later P-40 versions, and then the P-40F-10, it had manual instead of electrically operated cowl flap controls, and the P-40F-15 had winterized equipment, and the P-40F-20 had a revised oxygen flow system for the pilot. A radio mast was also fitted to late production P-40Fs. So you can see how with little increments they do little changes, just like every aircraft, and therefore need a slightly different designation. The P-40F was powered by a Packard-built Merlin 5 1651 12-cylinder V liquid-cooled engine, rated at 1300 horsepower for takeoff and 1120 horsepower at 18,500 feet. So the one in game is pretty much the one that we have. In my opinion, it's just named wrong. But then again, that might just be my Britishness coming out instead of my American. The maximum speed was 320 miles per hour for this thing at 5,000 feet, 340 miles per hour at 10,000 feet, and 352 miles per hour at 15,000 feet, and also 364 miles an hour at 10,000 feet. An altitude of 10,000 feet could be attained in 4.5 minutes, and an altitude of 20,000 feet could be reached in 11.6 minutes. The maximum range of this machine was 700 miles at 20,000 feet, and this was clean, of course. 875 miles with 143 imp gallon drop tank, and 1,500 miles with 141.5 imp gal drop tank. So a decent range for what it was. The service ceiling of this was 34,400 feet, and the weight was 6,590 pounds empty, 8,500 pounds normally loaded, and also 9,350 pounds maximum for the airframe. So it could be overloaded if it needed to. The dimensions were 37 feet 4 inches wingspan, 33 feet 4 length, and 10 feet 7 high, 236 square feet wing area, and the armament was, of course, these 650 machine guns on the wings. There was 150 P-40Fs which were supplied to the RAF under Lend-Lease. This is why I think eventually we'll get a British premium version of this aircraft. The RAF assigned them the name Kitty Hawk II, and the Kitty Hawk IIs were offset from USAAF allocations 41-13697 by 14599. The RAF serials were FL219 to 448, and unfortunately the P-40Ls were also mixed in with this, so with no mark distinction, so it's kind of hard to tell you know, how many were Fs, how many were Ls, and all of that, which is a little bit annoying just by looking at the RAF serial number. It cannot give you a full picture of which aircraft did what, meaning that we can't work out how successful something like a P-40F was when it could be a P-40L. In the event of the actual, you know, serving for the RAF, very few of the aircraft actually served, and a lot of them were actually returned to the USAAF for use in North Africa in 1942 and 43. Some of them were also lost at sea before reaching the RAF. You've got to remember the constant supply wars going on in the North Sea and also the Atlantic, and a bunch of the other aircraft were handed over to the Free French, who operated them in North Africa, and also 100 of them were transferred to the USSR. So this was given to basically everyone, which isn't a terrible idea, since it seems like a perfect aircraft for the Lend-Lease program. The designation, the YP-40F, was unofficially assigned to the P-40F serial number 41-13602, and it was used for experimental tests of the cooling system and the tail rudder. I tell you what, the one in game could really use that. The coolant system was moved in several different configurations, including a mounting fitted inside a thickened wing root section. So they tried all they could to keep this engine alive, which is kind of hilarious to me. So also a number of P-40Fs were selected at random. They were withdrawn from operational service and fitted with Allison V1610-81s in place of their original Merlins. These planes were intended for training duties, and they were redesignated the P-40R1s. Similar conversions from the P-40Ls were designated the P-40R2s, and Army records report that over 600 such conversions were made, but only 70 such conversions can be confirmed by serial number. So as you can see, the numbers are a little bit whack when it comes to the P-40s, especially when it comes to the Fs and the Ls, because they decided to mix them quite a lot. But it does give you a good idea of how it is an aircraft which did travel the world. It was served for America, it served for France, Britain, the Soviets at the time, and also it was upgraded in many slight different ways. So When it comes to the P40 series, the reason why a lot of people have been calling out for new variants is because there's so damn many of them, and they all have little interesting ideas to them. And the P40F is one of them, even if you just look at the variants itself inside the P40F. So hopefully, eventually, we do get some more variants of this aircraft. And just to let you know, there was an absolute ton of them with little different changes. But anyway, let's get on to some gameplay. So when it comes to the P40F, one of the biggest issues that it has is the same that the P40E has, and it's the issue with getting up to altitude before you engage the enemy. Now, especially with the extra BF-110s which have been added, this is something that is incredibly important to do because you don't want the BF-110s being higher than you, diving on you and getting the first shot off, even though it's very easy to, be able to dodge them. The problem with it is when it comes to stuff like BF-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. Now, with those aircraft, if they get above you, they can just energy fight you all day, and you can't really do a lot. You have a little bit more leeway when it comes to the P40F. With it, what you have is an aircraft which is slightly more maneuverable than its predecessor, and that means that being able to make enemies overshoot and go after them is something that can be done with relative ease. The problem with this is you have to play an incredibly defensive playstyle, and after 1 or 2 turns, you don't have the energy to keep up that defensive playstyle. Now, because it doesn't climb as well as other aircraft around the tier, such as Spitfire, BF-109, Focke-Wulf 190, anything Japanese, what you have to do is you have to play it patiently. This is an aircraft which is not really going to be able to get up to the bombers once they go over unless you are fully upgraded and weapon, and overall you have to just wait that extra minute for your allies to engage the enemy, and then you come in as a supportive fighter to mop up. And to mop up you can do. The P40 has plenty of ammunition to be able to annihilate anything that's in front of it. With the 50 cals, a lot of people have been saying they're not doing as much damage. Me personally, I haven't had the issue. What I've been doing is knocking pilots a lot with them and also setting fires. I use the stealth belts on them because I'm comfortable with them. If you're not comfortable with the stealth, you should use universal. The default belt is not as good as the universal belt. So overall, with the P40F in this role, if you are able to aim effectively and you're able to snapshot, the elevator and the rudder is incredibly responsive at speeds around 400. It seems to be the sweet spot of this aircraft because you can also use combat flaps to an incredible degree. So let's say your team has engaged the enemy. What you want to do is wait that extra half a minute and then go and engage. Wait for the enemies to fall on them and then go after the enemies. The P40 is a wonderful aircraft to do this. You could say this about any aircraft when it comes to that scenario, but the difference with the P40 is the cleanup. A lot of aircraft cannot clean up with this. The P40 can because it has enough ammunition, it has the 650 cals, and it has the maneuverability to stay on people's tails no matter what they are fighting. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful with the P40 though, because there are certain things to it which make it a little bit harder to do. But as long as you are looking at your speed counter, you shouldn't really have an issue. So the first one is the fact that it locks up. So it locks up at 550 kilometers an hour. What this means is your elevator becomes incredibly tough to move. So as long as you are sat in a dive at 550, well, you've got to make sure to try and pull out of that quickly, otherwise you're going to go too fast and rip your wings, or you're going to just plow straight into the ground. Another thing that is a bit annoying with it is the overheating issue with the engine. The engine does overheat quite easily, and knocking it back to 100 will eventually cool it, but it might not be enough. It might not be enough time to be able to save the engine. So what you have to do is you have to knock it back to 90 or 80 to cool it down, push it back up to 100, and it will stay not overheated the whole time. So that is what you have to do with the engine, just to make sure that it doesn't kill itself. You do get a little bit more power with war emergency power. It doesn't seem to be that much though. I wouldn't say it's that important. I'm sure it will be in certain situations, but I think that your use of combat flaps and you sitting around that 400 kilometers an hour is what to be much more focused on. A lot of people, and this is IAS by the way, a lot of people that I've seen, especially German pilots with their BF-110s, BF-109s, 190s, because that's basically all I've played so far in it, what I've seen is them getting perplexed by the fact that these P-40Fs can outturn them. And around that sweet spot, if you're using the elevator and the ailerons, the P-40F can easily outturn anything you bring towards it, especially at mid-altitude. So you've got to be careful with that if you are a German player. You have to be careful with the fact that you are going to get outturned by this aircraft, and it's not going to be as easy as you may think to be able to get away from it and also to be able to fight it. It will be able to get on your 6 very, very easily if you're going too fast or if you screw up once. What you have to do is fight it in an energy fighting way. Come down, try and hit it, move up. Come down, try and hit it, move up. Don't give him any type of advantage to be able to get on you. Now this is obviously in a one-on-one situation. If you're in a two-on-one situation, you have to use your superior climb rate to be able to set up those situations, split up the P-40s and go after them. But back to the P-40. It is kind of annoying that you have to take 30 minutes of fuel, and this is a minimum load. On top of it, you get 29 minutes fully upgraded. This to me is a bit too much for especially realistic battles and definitely for ground, and it just means that you're a little bit heavier than you should be. It would be nice if that was knocked down to like 20 minutes, something like that. The extra bombs, I haven't personally used them, but the thing is, it's always nice to have that option in ground realistic, and also the ground belts on the 50 cals have not been nerfed, so they still do really good penetration on stuff like P-40s, not P-40s, Panzer 4Gs, Panzer 4Fs, through the cupola, through the driver's hatch. Same with the Panzer 3s. You can kill a lot of these German vehicles with 50 cals, and also T-34s you can do it if you're lucky. So it's a good machine in ground realistic, it's a great machine in air realistic, as long as you have that little bit of patience with it that you're gonna need to get up to altitude to be able to get the amount of energy you need to go after the enemies. But overall, a fun plane to fly, just like its predecessor, especially after it got its flight model changed about a year ago. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.